Welcome back. In light of a Michigan Supreme Court decision this morning, State Attorney General Dana Nessel has declared the criminal case in the Flint water crisis officially closed. Nessel's efforts to continue prosecuting the case fell apart over the use of a one-man grand jury legal maneuver instead of traditional preliminary hearings for the defendants, including former Governor Rick Snyder. A lower court ruled that it violated due process, forcing the Attorney General's office to dismiss all of the charges late last year. This is the second time the criminal case against Snyder and other officials has been tossed. Back in 2019, Nessel herself dismissed the charges, claiming the investigation prior to that point had also been flawed. Now, joining us now is the former special prosecutor in the Flint water case, Attorney Todd Flood. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the specifics of that maneuver I mentioned, I want to talk about a statement. The prosecutor is involved in this latest attempt to revive the charges.
Sure.
Released a statement this morning saying, in part, the court decided that a process which has stood in place for over a century, one whose legitimacy the court upheld repeatedly, was simply not good enough to hold those responsible for the Flint water crisis accountable for their actions. Our disappointment in the Michigan Supreme Court is exceeded only by our sorrow for the people of Flint. So again, before we get into that maneuver, Todd, I want to look big picture. Is this essentially, as the prosecutor seemed to acknowledge, the end of the road for holding anyone accountable here?
It is. It is. I mean, any attempt would be futile. There is a Hail Mary that they could throw with regards to reviving some cases that are still within the statute of limitations. But the problem is that their team that did this investigation is tainted because they have privileged material. And you'd have to bring in a whole new team. And who's going to spend that money?
So where did things go wrong? Let's talk about that maneuver, the one-man grand jury. In layman's terms, for people who don't know the legality of all of this,
sure.
Is the Attorney General's office, the prosecutors, are they correct in saying that this is a common maneuver that is repeatedly used?
It was at one time, but it's, the way that it was used is improper. The law is the law. You know, however you want to interpret it or read it, it's clear. A one-man grand jury can be used to do an investigation, to bring the case forward. But ultimately, due process, there's a separation of powers. The government, right, has to do the charging. The judicial branch, they're not doing the charging. So here, you can do a citizen's grand jury, and they can issue a charge. But a one-man grand jury, as the statute is written and is interpreted, is to be used as an investigative tool to bring witnesses in that, you know, if you were going after the mob, or there was witness intimidation, or there were some scary things, or it was an old case, like, you know, we had the child killer case. There was a one-man grand jury, and you wanted to keep it going to see what you could find, but you wanted to do it behind closed doors. Here's what we did. We had a group of judges. We all sat down. It was in confidence, and we said, hey, what's the best way to bring the Flint charges forward? And it was clear to us that it was best to do it in front of a judge at a preliminary exam, where we had the burden to show probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause that the defendant committed those crimes. And the reason we wanted that, we wanted transparency. We wanted the citizens of Flint to see what was going on. And we wanted due process, basically to say, you know, we could show this case past this stage. Because grand juries, you know, there's an old adage, you can bind over a ham sandwich for murder, right, with a grand jury. So we wanted this out in front. We wanted it transparent, and we wanted basically the public to see whether or not there was enough to stick. And it did. You know, we were ready to go to trial on
So that
manslaughter.
momentum was already there. What
Sure.
happened then when Attorney General Nessel comes in? How did you end up separate from this case?
So, you know, with the victor goes the spoil. I'm an old school guy. So I have great respect for Fadwa Hamoud and Kim Worthy. They're friends, they're great lawyers, they're great law enforcement people for the state of Michigan, no question. I was kind of doomed before it started, unfortunately because of politics, but that's how it worked out.
The politics being that the Attorney General just wanted her own people
Sure.
involved.
Well, she wanted her own people, but she also brought people from the outside in. But at the end of the day, that's all fine and well. Unfortunately, it's not fine and well for the citizens of Flint and the 146 people that passed of Legionella and the countless people that were poisoned, the babies that were poisoned with lead. They'll never get justice. They'll never get mercy, right? And they wish they could turn back the hands of time. Just follow the money in this case. Follow the money as far as why the switch was made, how it was done. It's a tragic story, and we don't have enough time to go into the tragic part of this, but it should have never been done, that the Flint water plant was used to distribute water because it was never ready from the beginning. We should have just stayed with the Detroit water. They wanted the KWA pipe. They should have just built it and left Detroit service until it was done.
What is left for the people in the Flint community who have been affected by this? I know the civil cases, there was a settlement, about $600 million. What does that translate to on an individual basis? What does that really mean for these families?
So there's going to be a large disparity between smaller pots and the larger pots. You'll see a metric system that's used. So one, what were your damages? That's going to be the big measure. Was there illness? Was there, what did you have to go through? And there'll be a judge that allocates the pot for the money for each individual and each individual claim. So, to be honest with you, it doesn't sound like a lot per individual. But I don't know. I haven't seen the breakdown, and no one has.
Based on everything you have seen in these past several years with this case, is there any doubt in your mind that a crime did occur rather than just some mistakes?
Oh, no. I showed that a crime was committed. I mean, anyone that watched the case or read the opinions of the courts, I think it was Judge Crawford and a couple others, Judge Manley and Judge Goggins, that had the preliminary exams, said that our team proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Not that that was the standard, but in my mind, no. It's like the weather person. You see a big storm coming, it's on the Doppler radar, right? And you have a duty to warn someone that that storm's coming, and you say, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna not warn anybody. I'm gonna tell them not to take cover, and people die, right? That's what happened here. There was clear notice that Legionella was in the system and was getting into homes. There was clear notice that lead was leaching into water systems, into individuals' homes, and they didn't give proper notice when they had a duty to do so.
No. If you were a part of this community, affected, you and your household, your children affected by this, what would you do going forward? Is there anything to do at this point?
No. As far as the criminal case goes, no. No, there isn't. But, the sad thing about this case is the city of Flint is hooked for $225 million in a bond that they have to pay for this pipe. And that to me is something that should be fought. As far as citizens go in the city of Flint, the first and foremost is to make sure that there are proper pipes and that it's done right and that we have good, health, safe water.
Yeah. If God forbid there's a similar incident, a similar crisis like this going forward, do you think lessons have been learned? Will there be a different response based on this whole debacle kind of going off the rails here?
So this is a unique one, but we already saw today, I think it was Redford, but we see around the state where lead is leaching into pipes and our infrastructure is bad. So there are really, really smart scientists and really smart water people that know how to make potable water. And these pipes we have out here, if they're protected and they're taken care of, they work, right? Yeah. You just have to know your chemistry, and you have to know how to produce potable water.
Whose stories stick out to you the most? I imagine you met a lot of people there in Flint who were deeply affected by this and always will be. What sticks out to you the most in your time covering this?
Being in places where I saw things you wouldn't think you would ever see in our country. being with a mother that pulled the life support from her daughter because she had Legionella, and she passed because of her organs breaking down, because she had other comorbidities. The fact that I walked with families to get water for them. I know this about Flint, and something that's going to stick with me. I have a lot of friends in Flint, and they're a resilient, beautiful, amazing community. They just need the support that you would get in Birmingham. They need the support you would get in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
I really have formed and forged lifelong relationships with people that I love, and I'll stay with them forever. But I think this is one of those places where we have to, as a community of a state, as a country, we have to step up and make sure that they're healthy.
Yeah. Do you think this ever would have been allowed to happen in one of those communities you just mentioned?
Oh, heck no. No. Common sense, right? This is not gonna, this wouldn't happen in Birmingham. No, that's not gonna happen. This was about a city that was on the brink of bankruptcy. Detroit at the same time was in bankruptcy. The governor didn't want two cities at the same time in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
The emergency manager was in place. They were broke, and they didn't have any avenue to collect funds because the tax dollars were down, right? They cut the police, they cut the trash, they cut the lights, and they needed cash, right? So ultimately, they end up having to borrow money, $225 million, that they're stuck with through basically a cure for insomnia, a thing called an administrative consent order. And all that was just this mechanism to make it so the city of Flint was forced to use this terrible water treatment plant while they were buying and paying for the KWA.
It's a real shame, all of it.
It is.
All right.
So,
Todd, thank you so much. This is
thanks for
attorney
having me.
Todd Flood. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.